The following topics and themes were carefully covered and researched to maintain the informative integrity of the video in an attempt to explore specific details while maintaining historical accuracy. This video is constructed to be less comical and more informative to demonstrate a respect to the history, culture, and the people it affects. This video does not represent Restoration Games and people affiliated with the company. This video is an analysis on perspective, and everything said that isn't directly quoted comes from me and me alone. You will find cited sources in the bottom right throughout the video, and the description will include links for viewers who wish to find out more. So I know that due to my busier life, I haven't had time to post my traditional videos, and I know that there's some really amazing sets I could cover, assuming I have time to. I definitely want to explore those, since they have some of my favorite fighters in the game and are incredibly represented. But we're going to skip those for now, because this is a special case. The video you're about to watch is going to potentially be the most important video on my channel. Because of this, I took its development very seriously. The goal of this video is to shed light and discuss why I think Stars and Stripes belongs in the Unmatched library.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. This is John Philip Sousa, and I'm very glad to be here with my band representing my own country, America, on this international program.
August 2025. Board gaming is struggling to survive in the economical quicksand that is the modern age. Old games are rising, old companies are falling, and right in the center of it all is the biggest board gaming convention of the year. Welcome to Indianapolis. Our setting is filled with fans from all over the world here to celebrate their favorite hobby, board gaming. This is Gen Con, the big stage where Restoration Games announced the set we're going to talk about today. You see, Unmatched has been at an all-time high recently, with the conclusion of the Battle of Legends trilogy being widely celebrated, the massive success of the second installment in Unmatched Adventures, and the return of Bruce Lee for newer players who didn't get access to his limited run beforehand, now alongside the greatest himself, Muhammad Ali. But we're not here to talk about any of those sets today. We're here to talk about one of the sets announced in Indianapolis, to the shock of audiences both at the convention and in online forums over the next few months. Stars and Stripes. Now, Stars and Stripes caused mixed reactions. Some folks were excited to see a set revolving around American culture in the game, while many other folks were uncomfortable with the inclusion of particular themes and characters. Like the sets before it, Stars and Stripes captures a historical aspect of a culture. The best example of this is Sun's origin, taking two historical Japanese figures and bringing them to this fantastical setting. But why does Stars and Stripes feel weirder to represent? Well, I'm going to rip the band-aid off and say it. This is probably the hardest time to be representing American culture. No matter what your stance is with the political world, we can all agree that America is a hot topic right now. Societies both in and out of America are avoiding celebrating the country since its recent actions have been so damaging. So why would Restoration Games release such a controversial set right now? Let's analyze the set's skeleton and look into the raw history of these characters to see if we can identify why I believe this set not only belongs with the rest of the Unmatched library, but is an exciting inclusion. George Washington has been the main source of discourse and unease with the release of this set, and justifiably so. But before we cover that, let's talk about what Washington is representing, and the incredible accomplishments he has under his belt. I believe in order to represent a historical culture, you want to represent the full picture. Washington is a major part of that picture, being a founding father, the first president, and one of the main reasons why America was able to achieve its independence. While he may have the failings we're going to cover, that doesn't deny the impact he had on his country. The focus on Washington's design is his leadership and his history as a spy. First, we need to analyze why those themes were the ones Restoration Games decided to cover. For this, we need to briefly talk about game theory. Game theory is the branch of mathematics concerned with the analysis of strategies for dealing with competitive situations where the outcome of a participant's choice of action depends critically on the actions of other participants. Within Unmatched, the perfect balance of a fighter design is when the mechanical aspects of the game swiftly blend with the thematic aspects of the character, creating an ultimate middle ground of a fighter that interacts with the game system majestically while also properly representing the personality of that character. A perfect example of this is a fighter like Alice, who mechanically plays with the system by increasing her general values to exceed the average, in particular shifting moments between her stances. Thematically, those stances are playing with the eat me and drink me concepts of Alice growing and shrinking within her story. This allows the player using her to feel like they are taking on the persona of Alice whilst playing the game, interacting with the system and connecting with the key themes within her deck. This is why Alice is a heavily beloved fighter in the game for both casual audiences and competitive players alike. Translating this towards Washington, the player should be able to express their playstyle whilst connecting to his own, and thematically taking on the persona of a spy master, organizing a tactical triumph from the shadows. These themes can be seen depicted in the shrouded art within his deck, and the mechanical use of ruse tokens to bait the opponent to make a mistake based on their prediction and your bluff. Washington was not a fiery commander, an inspiring speaker, or a man who could produce instant melodrama. He did not have the type of personality that would later be called charismatic. The general was a calm man of stern determination and steady nerves, a man who was inventive in combat and resourceful enough to change tactics quickly when the tide of the battle turned. With all that said, what's the deal with Washington and spycraft? You might have never heard of this, and you'd be excused not to, as it by design was meant to be secretive. Even while researching this video, I personally struggled to find a lot of information on this topic. That being said, I did not fail. Washington was part of a spy ring called the Culper Ring, an American spy network operating during the War of American Independence. The Culper Spy Ring provided George Washington with information on British troop movements. This network operated successfully in and around New York City for 5 years, during which time no spy was ever unmasked. Even Washington was ignorant of the spies' identities. So how could espionage so silent be as impactful as it was in the war? In order to find out, we need to know what exactly the spy ring did during said time. Meet Talmadge, a man appointed as Director of Military Intelligence by Washington. His objective was to secure information on the British in New York City. Talmadge utilized a number of protective measures. Talmadge gave his informants pseudonyms and invented a numerical substitution system to identify his informants rather than use names. 763 numbers were used, with 711 denoting General Washington, 745 representing England, and 727 for New York. Talmadge sent Washington a dictionary on how to read these codes. The spy ring established a sophisticated method of conveying information to Washington, who is based at New Windsor in New York. As a result, all information sent to Washington had to be transported through British-held territory. Austin Rowe rode from Talcott, Long Island to New York City, where he entered Townsend's establishment. There, Rowe placed an order for Talmadge, who signed under his code name John Bolton. The messages were then hidden in goods that Rowe took back to Talcott and hid on a farm belonging to Abraham Woodhull, who would later retrieve the messages. Anna Strong, who owned a farm near to Woodhull's barn, would then hang a black petticoat on her clothesline that Caleb Brewster could see in order to signal him to retrieve the documents. Strong indicated which cove Brewster should land at by hanging up handkerchiefs to designate the specific cove. Brewster would then deliver the messages to Talmadge. So as you can see, the Culper Spy Ring developed a sophisticated method to converse while under the radar of the British. This allowed their identities to remain hidden throughout the war, and to this day, many of these spies were still never discovered. This information battle heavily impacted the revolution and prevented shifts in the war that could have given the British the edge they needed to seize the revolutionaries. For example, under the command of General Henry Clinton, the British were going to launch an expedition on Rhode Island. Talmadge, using the spy ring, was able to inform Washington in time for him to set up an offensive position which caused the attack to be cancelled. These are a few examples of many on how the Culper Spy Ring impacted the war, but the spy ring wasn't all General Washington did. During his time as a commander-in-chief, Washington changed the tide of the revolution, and it wasn't as easy as a big name and a famous face. Washington was a tactician and a great leader who successfully took disadvantageous positions in battle and achieved victory. He would think outside the box and execute maneuvers that set the revolutionaries into a better position despite their lack in numbers. Washington had access to hundreds of small flatboats that he had been collecting from the New York area. On the night of August 29th, the general ordered soldiers, former fishermen from Marblehead, Massachusetts, under the command of Colonel John Glover, to quietly organize the boats into a flotilla and to wait for the beginning of a massive evening evacuation by the entire army. When darkness descended, the fishermen watched as regiments of men moving quietly and in perfect order climbed down from the heights above them and scrambled into the boats. Glover and his men then pulled them across to Manhattan and out of danger under the cloak of a fortuitous fog. Finally, after the hours of watching the slow, soundless evacuation, George Washington, the last man on the east side of the river, climbed into the final boat and made his escape. When the British attacked in the morning, they found campfires still burning, but the heights empty. Washington's tenacity during the war was a major reason as to why American independence was achieved. But Washington isn't a symbol or a saint. He is human. He had his flaws. And Washington in particular had a major fault we have to discuss. George Washington inherited enslaved people at the early age of 11. In his will, Augustine left his son the 280-acre family farm near Fredericksburg, Virginia. In addition, Washington was willed 10 enslaved people. Washington purchased more enslaved people in 1755. This unfortunate, undeniable reality stains the legacy of a man who made a generational impact in the American Revolutionary War. There is no excuse, defense, or forgiveness that can make up for the suffering of the people of that time and his indulgence in that reality. The Americans could not complain that they were slaves to England when they held slaves themselves. I'd like to emphasize this quote as the strongest representation of the immorality of slave trade and of Washington's position during it all. As a young adult, he began to question the concept of slave trade. Later in his life, he took stronger stances. There's not a man living who wishes more sincerely than I do to see a plan adopted for the abolition of it, he said, hoping it would be abolished legislatively. George Washington changed the course of history, and if not for him, America and the revolutionaries of that time would not have found freedom. But Washington was not a perfect man. He had many failures, like America itself, that shouldn't be hidden or denied. I think using him to represent American spycraft and his position during the independence of America feels like a complete picture for an American culture set. Tucked away in a quiet Monmouth neighborhood stands the Pike Sheldon house, an unassuming two-story home with a story that helped shape the American West. Located at 406 South 3rd Street, this historic Greek Revival residence is best known as the birthplace of Wyatt Earp, born here on March 19, 1848. Many of you might not know Wyatt Earp. Admittedly, I had never heard of him prior to his inclusion in Stars and Stripes. Most of my friends have mentioned the film Tombstone when discussing Wyatt Earp. Released in 1993, it was written by Kevin Jarre, directed by George P. Cosmatos, and starring Kurt Russell as Wyatt Earp and Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday. If you've already seen the film, I'm sure you can collect just how much passion and inspiration was taken from it, with direct quotes within the names and the art in the deck. For those who haven't seen it, here's a brief summary. A retired lawman heads to Tombstone, Arizona, where a major silver strike is occurring, which is attracting a gang of red sash-wearing miscreants that cause problems for the people of Tombstone. This is the story Wyatt Earp is known for, but this is just a movie. What about the actual Wyatt Earp? Well, to know this, we can't just strike silver, we need to strike gold. In 1850, the Earp family moved to Pella, Iowa, where Wyatt spent the rest of his childhood. As a young man, he followed the western frontier and held many jobs: freight hauler, buffalo hunter, stagecoach driver, and most notably, lawman. He gained recognition for his work in frontier towns like Wichita and Dodge City, Kansas, earning both admiration and controversy for his methods of keeping order. After the Civil War, with the return of his brother Virgil Earp, Wyatt joins him in working as a stagecoach driver. This leads him to wander the west between California and Arizona. Eventually, during one of his solo travels, he helps a police officer in Wichita, Kansas. A gang member was attempting to steal a horse and with the help of Earp is apprehended. This leads Wyatt Earp into becoming a lawman, the title he is most recognized for. In 1876, Wyatt became the deputy town marshal of Dodge City, Kansas. Eventually, he retires from this position and begins his travels again, this time to Tombstone, Arizona. He got news from his brother Virgil that there was a massive silver strike occurring. In the Old West, a silver strike was when a significant silver ore deposit was discovered, which caused travelers from all over to rush in, rapid economic booms to occur, and boomtowns to take shape. The silver strike of Tombstone, Arizona attracted many, like Wyatt and his brothers. They were even accompanied by Wyatt's closest friend, Doc Holliday. Unfortunately for them, it also attracts the same gang Wyatt had been dealing with since his early lawman days. This caused tension, which eventually led to one of the most legendary gunfights in American Western history. His most famous chapter began in Tombstone, Arizona, where he arrived in 1879 with his brothers Virgil and Morgan. Rising tensions with a group of outlaws led to the legendary gunfight at the OK Corral on October 26, 1881. A 30-second shootout that became one of the most storied events of the American West. Now, let's pause for a second. I want to talk about the beauty and irony. You see, to the untrained eye, Wyatt might be referred to as a cowboy, In present day, that's simply the word used to describe this manner of dressing and the Western theming of a character. However, this would be the wrongest way to describe Wyatt Earp, because not only is he not a cowboy, but the name of the gang we've been talking about this entire time causing a ruckus in the American West might be one you recognize. They go by none other than the Cowboys. The real Cowboys were a group of organized criminals connected to Maine families such as the Clantons and the McClorys. In March of 1881, the stern rivalry between the Earps and the Cowboys began. Wyatt joins a posse after some cowboys rob a Tombstone stagecoach and kill the driver. Together, they jail Luther King, who was an associate of the Cowboys in Tombstone, Arizona. King confessed to holding horses for the robbery, which involved allies of the Clanton and McClory families. Unfortunately, he escaped custody shortly after being jailed, so Wyatt continues his search. June 2nd, 1881. Wyatt seeks help in this search from Ike Clanton, a rancher with ties to the Cowboys. Wyatt, hoping that catching these men will get him elected sheriff, offers Ike a reward of $6,000 for his help. Ike sets a plan in motion, but gets increasingly paranoid that Wyatt will inform the Cowboys of his betrayal. This leads Ike Clanton to spend his nights in Tombstone drinking and making slurred threats to the Earp clan, which eventually set the scene for the gunfight at the OK Corral. The fight pits Wyatt, his brothers Morgan and Virgil, and Doc Holliday against Ike Clanton, Billy Clanton, Frank McClory, and Tom McClory. Frank and Tom McClory and Billy Clanton are killed. Morgan and Virgil Earp and Doc Holliday are wounded but survive. Ike Clanton runs away, and Wyatt emerges from the fight unharmed. After the gunfight, Ike Clanton, the sole surviving cowboy, files murder charges against Wyatt, Virgil, Morgan, and Doc Holliday. This leads to the arrest of Wyatt and Doc Holliday, jailed for a total of 16 days. Judge Wells Spicer clears the Earps and Doc Holliday of their murder charges, and the men go free, but Ike and the Cowboys weren't going to let that slide. December 1881. Wyatt's brother Virgil is shot while walking home from a saloon to his hotel, where he is staying to protect himself from assassins, crippling his arm for life. A day later, Wyatt is made Deputy United States Marshal. In the Old West, a Deputy United States Marshal was a federal law enforcement officer appointed to uphold federal law, track fugitives, and serve court orders across vast, often lawless territories. The Cowboys continued their savagery towards the Earps. In March of 1882, Wyatt and Morgan were attacked in a saloon. While Wyatt may have remained unharmed, Morgan Earp was unfortunately killed. Virgil was permanently injured by the Cowboys, and Morgan was murdered. This sent Wyatt down a road of no return. The lawman began the most legendary hunt in American West alongside the clan, and most prominently, the friend that stood beside him during the events at Tombstone, Arizona, Doc Holliday. Wyatt led the Earp Vendetta ride, personally hunting down those he held responsible. This campaign added to his complex legacy, seen by some as frontier justice, and by others as vigilante revenge. Wyatt seeked out each and every cowboy. Many consider it an act of criminal justice to stop what was considered to be one of the first criminal organizations from seizing the West. Others call Earp a vigilante for the crime of taking lives. What couldn't be denied was that Wyatt changed the West. Any town he entered, any saloon he stepped in, many knew his name, and the Cowboys knew to fear him, to fear the law, fear the fan, fear Wyatt Earp. In early 1942, the Bureau of Labor Statistics predicted a big problem. Unless action was taken, a shortage of 6 million workers would bring the country's productivity to a halt by the end of 1943. Just months after the United States formally entered World War II, American men were leaving for active duty overseas, and it was critical to prevent interruptions to industry. The solution was as clear as the problem. With the exception of the few 100,000 boys of pre-draft age, a government study stated, this gap will have to be plugged almost entirely by women. President Roosevelt tasked the Office of War Information, a newly formed federal propaganda agency, with selling the idea of women workers to the country. Their importance to a nation engaged in total war must be convincingly presented. Joining the government's effort were private industry and the American media, who together generated some of the era's most enduring and well-known images. Enter Rosie the Riveter, A fictional icon made to motivate women to do their part in assisting their country. But where exactly does she come from? What was the idea behind her design, and what does she really represent? In order to find this out, we have to learn about who made her. What comes to your mind when I say Rosie the Riveter? It's this poster, right? Well, nowadays that may be correct. This isn't actually Rosie the Riveter, at least not originally. This poster was made by J.H. Miller. J. Howard Miller was an American graphic artist. He painted posters during World War II in support of the war effort. Among them, the famous "We Can Do It" poster, frequently misidentified as Rosie the Riveter. The image of a female worker in denim coveralls and a red and white polka dot headscarf with a Westinghouse employee identification badge pinned on her lapel was reproduced on posters for display inside the company's munitions factories. Miller's image had a limited and largely private run, appearing on Westinghouse shop floors over a 2-week period from February 15th to 28th, 1943, before the company tacked up the next in a series of his paintings. Like the "We Can Do It" poster, each painting bore a different message intended to increase production, boost morale, avoid absenteeism, or prevent strikes. Beyond the Westinghouse factory walls, however, the bandaned woman remained unknown. Miller's subject was also unnamed, but not for long. So, if the woman on this poster isn't Rosie the Riveter, then who is she? And who is Rosie the Riveter? The name Rosie the Riveter comes from a song written by Red Evans and John Jacob Loeb and sung by the four Vagabonds. Rosie the Riveter told a story happening across the country. Women were going to work in record numbers, doing jobs unlike those they had ever done. All the day long, whether rain or shine, the lyrics went. She's part of the assembly line, she's making history, working for victory, Rosie the Riveter. According to Loeb's widow, no single woman inspired the song. The name Rosie was chosen for its alliterative appeal. In the naming, though, an American archetype was born. The more we uncover, the more pieces start falling into place. Rosie the Riveter doesn't come from a singular person. She isn't an idolized historical figure who achieved something in American history and therefore was made into a hero. She's an idea that the women of America could stand up and dedicate themselves to doing their part in the war effort. This would explain why the tagline of our mystery gal on the "We Can Do It" poster was so infamous. There is one other poster that solidified Rosie as a cultural icon, however. Created by Norman Rockwell, this is the Saturday Evening Post's cover on May 29th, 1943. Rosie, by this point being a well-known character in American culture, further depicts the idea of a hard-working, patriotic woman. On her lunch break from the assembly line, she sits denim-clad with a rivet gun on her lap. The U.S. Treasury Department's subsequent use of Rockwell's art to advertise war bonds ensured that his was the image Americans would identify with Rosie the Riveter throughout the war. So now we know where the name Rosie the Riveter comes from, what the women on these posters represent, and even why mechanically and unmatched her deck is all about working on her machines and sequencing attacks to activate her mech, the last point being a unique take from Restoration games. So surely we've covered every aspect about this character and we can move on to the next chapter, right? Wrong. You see, there's more to this story, and I, in an attempt to reflect the unfortunate reality of that time, have lulled you into forgetting a key aspect to Rosie the Riveter in Unmatched. In my opinion, one of the coolest sidekicks in the game for what she represents and how she makes Rosie the Riveter an incredible addition to the game in the modern day. Rosie faced some reasonable backlash as times changed and society modernized. In the present day, she is recognized as the propaganda she is. Additionally, she misrepresents the story of the real women who stood up and worked during this time, which is something Wendy the Welder represents beautifully. Black women worked by the hundreds of thousands during the war, but were unacknowledged by the government and the mainstream media. Rosie the Riveter is classic propaganda 101, says historian Emma McClendon. You've got this woman going to work helping the war effort, and what is she wearing? A blue denim jumpsuit and a red bandana, and she's white. So in that sense, she becomes the icon of America, of the red, white, and blue. Many of the hard-working women during this time were black, a fact that was neglected from mainstream media and wrongfully unacknowledged. This damaged Rosie's message of female independence and revealed the true idea behind it. It simply was propaganda. designed by the government to solve the very problem we read about at the beginning of this chapter. Enter Wendy the Welder. Wendy the Welder represent the women who welded and assembled steel plates into troop ships, supply ships, submarines, and aircraft carriers. These women, referred to as Wendy's, weren't as popular as Rosie the Riveter, but still played a massive role in this time. Unfortunately, Wendy wasn't as socially impactful as Rosie, but in a way this comes as a positive, as the main visual reference to Wendy's is this famous photo of two African American welders at the Landers Ferry and Clark plant in New Britain, Connecticut in 1943. Using this, Restoration Games had the genius idea of adding Wendy into Rosie's design as a fighter, serving a key role in preparing Rosie's mech mechanically while rightfully acknowledging the incredible hardworking women who were misrepresented, removing the propaganda aspect of the original character and promoting the independence of all women. Not only has Rosie the Riveter personally become one of my favorite fighters in the game, but I believe she serves as an important inclusion into this incredibly diverse roster, solidifying her spot as an instant classic in the Unmatched library. John Henry said to his captain, "A man is nothing but a man. But before I let your steam drill beat me down, I'd die with a hammer in my hand. Lord, Lord, I'd die with a hammer in my hand." The folklore legend of John Henry is the most recognized aspect of the character. It's a story of man versus machine, where with enough determination man could overcome even the mightiest of beasts. A common question people ask about John is whether or not he was actually real. While the infamous ballad may have exaggerated some points, research shows that there was a real person that the John Henry legend is based off of. According to the ballad that made him famous, John Henry did battle with a steam-powered drill, beat the machine, and died. Folklorists have long thought John Henry to be mythical, but historian Scott Nelson has discovered that he was a real person, a 19-year-old from New Jersey who was convicted of theft in a Virginia court in 1866, sentenced to 10 years in the penitentiary, and put to work building the C&O Railroad. The legend of John Henry not only represents man overcoming machine, but also represents the steel drivers who needed to overcome the tireless work they were put through to form tunnels and railroads. Steel drivers were laborers tasked with creating pathways for railroad lines. This demanding work involved drilling holes in rock and heavy steel drills or spikes. John Henry, known for his exceptional strength and remarkable work ethic, quickly became one of the best steel drivers in the country. His extraordinary ability to work tirelessly and with unmatched speed made him a legend among his peers. But where did this story come from? John Henry certainly was infamous among steel drivers, but something must have happened in order to make him the folklore legend he's known as today. For that, we need to look at the construction of the railroads in the Allegheny Mountains of West Virginia. In the early 1870s, construction of the Chesapeake and Ohio Railway along the Greenbrier and New Rivers employed thousands of workers. Many of these men were African Americans who migrated to West Virginia in search of jobs. Jobs on the railroad were labor-intensive and low-paying, required long hours, and were at times dangerous. As the C&O Railway stretched westward along the Greenbrier River, the legend of John Henry was born at the Big Bend Mountain near Talcott, West Virginia. In February of 1870, workers began drilling the Great Bend Tunnel, where the Greenbrier River makes a 7-mile meander around Big Bend Mountain. Over 800 men, many of them African American, cut a 6,450-foot long tunnel through the mountain. This historical moment led to the idolization of John Henry in songs and stories. The steel-driving man rang through the ears of many, eventually being further encapsulated in particular genres such as the blues and most infamously, the Ballad of John Henry. John Henry represents labor workers. In a difficult time where inhumane work regimens were common and there was no crediting the hard workers that were extremely impactful in the development of America. Additionally, it speaks on the idea that machines are replacing human workers, that people will be out of jobs because a risk-free, more efficient, and faster machine performed the work of dozens of men with ease. The idea scared people of the time, and in response many stances such as John Henry stood the test of time to speak out against the idea of workers being replaced by our technological advancements. Sound familiar? The story of John Henry carries a poignant message that transcends time. It encapsulates the struggles faced by labor workers during an era marked by industrialization and technological advancement. John Henry's determination to defy the steam drill's encroachment on labor jobs illustrates the fear that machines will replace human workers. The story underscores the hardships endured by laborers, from grueling working conditions to meager pay, all in the pursuit of progress. The legend of John Henry has been used to represent the challenges of laborers. He's become a symbol of worker rights and a depiction of sheer human determination. Without loud messages like these in our culture, we'll begin to lose our way into acceptance of worker replacement businesses. John Henry is a powerful reminder that against all odds, we as people can persevere, and the authenticity of a good job from a hardworking person cannot be compared to the poor imitation from machines. So as you can see, Stars and Stripes is rich with American lore and culture. It sheds light onto the historical figures we recognize, correctly represents modern icons with a unique take that allows audiences today to enjoy the celebration of history, and accurately shows us the lesser-known truths behind ideas that are easily misinterpreted socially. Because of this, I am extremely excited for its inclusion to the game, and my desire with this video has been to show people why I look forward to bringing this set to the table with friends and family. And while I do wish to shed light on the subject of this set for the people with unease, this is not at all an attempt to discredit the very valid concerns people have with the set's release. My sole intention is to express and celebrate culture and history, and show how I think Restoration Games took the development of this set very seriously, and found a way to have these 4 fighters shine in the more than 70 fighters strong roster we are at today. Below in the description you'll have links to all the sources that I used in this video, along with currently available Stars and Stripes on Restoration Games' website. Please check it out, and thank you so much Restoration Games for giving me this opportunity. Thank you for watching, and be good people.